We've looked at Democratic Congressman Jared Moskowitz before appearing on Fox News. You have your Pete Buttigieg's who are really good at appearing on Fox News and delivering these messages well, and Jared Moskowitz does it very well also. And I have another moment for you here today where he went on the Fox News Sunday show with Shannon Bream, and the ending part that I'll show you is him speaking to this conversation, sort of panic mode that some individuals are suggesting maybe Biden should consider dropping off the ticket. I don't, number one, think that should. Number two, think it will happen. And I think it's a waste of our breath as we enter such an important election. I'll make my case for that afterwards. Then the subject of reproductive rights comes up and the border. And Jared Moskowitz makes the case on those. Here it is.
Recent polling shows that a lot of Americans agree with you. They give the edge to President Trump on immigration, on the economy, on crime, and on foreign policy. There are tough swing state polls out there for the president this week as well. And Nate Silver, one of the country's top pollsters, says if he's still struggling like this by August, he should consider leaving the ticket. Is that a conversation worth having if your goal is to make sure that President Trump does not get back to the White House?
No, it's not a conversation worth having. Nate, thanks for your participation. But this is ridiculous. We're well past that conversation. President Biden is going to be the nominee. We're going to have our convention, and he's going to win in November. This is going to be between two people, right? It's either really, the way I look at the election is, do you want Trump back or do you not? That is the crux of the issue. I think that's what American people are going to ask themselves when they go into that ballot.
I'm going to quickly pause your viewing of this video to ask you to subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to help us continue to grow. Just click that subscribe button. It's free, it's easy, but it's very helpful.
Do they want President Trump back, or do they not want him back? And that's going to depend on what's important to each solitary American. If you are for a woman's right to choose, then you will not be voting for President Trump. If you're for a woman having the rights to contraception, you won't be voting for President Trump. On immigration, quite frankly, I think both parties are to blame on what's going on with immigration, right? Democrats, I've said this before, Democrats were late to come to the table. When we came to the table and got a bipartisan agreement with a conservative bill coming out of the Senate, then Republicans walked away because Trump wants to use it in the election, right? He said, blame me. And so, at the end of the day, the election is very close. We're kind of at halftime now. We're going to get out of the summer, and all of a sudden it's going to be September, October. As we go into the election, people will look at what's the state of the economy at that moment and how do they feel about the country. But it is a very close election. It's down to a couple of states.
Yeah, so let's go through some of this. Media reports, political commentator and elections analyst Nate Silver, this was the first part of that question, is recommending President Joe Biden consider stepping aside for November's election if he's still struggling by August. And Jared Moskowitz, as he often does, handled the question perfectly, which is to quickly go, no, that's not, I'm not even going to dive into the explanation. Ridiculous, move on, here's the stakes of the election, right? So that people get quickly to the conversation that is worth our time, which is making sure people understand, as I'll keep saying, the stakes. And then what I thought was interesting, moving to that second point that he made, was he chose to lean into, for much of his answer, reproductive rights, which you've all seen me. If I'm in a conversation with someone and they say, I don't know who I'm going to vote for, what do I start with? Threat to democracy, right? Because that's the foundational thing. But do you really have the time to effectively explain to the Fox News viewers that threat, and will they believe you? And are you going to be compelling in your explanation in this sort of format? Probably not. But what can you quickly say that there are, especially Fox News women who are watching this particular show, who maybe could be compelled? Go straight to reproductive rights, because they can think whatever they like about Trump, but it's hard to deny just how damaging he's been. And so they aren't super to the right on that issue, then that could be a compelling issue to talk about, as Moskowitz did there. And then the final point, he said, as he said before, that he thinks on the issue of immigration, both Democrats and Republicans are to blame, which in a very general sense, sure, fair, because we got to govern often by compromising and working together. In that sense, you have culpability on both ends for any issues we're experiencing. I think right now, though, and that might be his Fox News version of the message on the border, but right now, it's really hard to make the case that almost all the blame shouldn't go to MAC Republicans because of their shooting down of this deal that was exactly what they've been asking for, and they only did it for political reasons. But that was sort of Moskowitz's point too. Just the first part was Democrats should have come to the table with that type of deal earlier. And that I've also been saying. It's not true that Biden wasn't proposing things. I've said since the beginning of his presidency. He put forward an immigration reform package that was shot down by Republicans. Then he keeps proposing more resources to the border in his budgets. So he's been at the table in that sense, but I think the type of deal we saw in this bipartisan border deal that really had a chance, if it weren't for Trump's intervening to get Republican votes, that maybe should have come earlier. But when it did come, they shot it down anyway. So now I do think you have to put the blame on Republicans if we're playing the blame game, and the American people do need to know who's responsible for what. So it is important to play the blame game a little bit, because right now Republicans somehow, the polling shows, are winning, are more supported on the subject of the border, even given the facts we've been going over for so long. And to reiterate those facts, you have Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff here delivering an incredible bit of remarks on this very subject.
No one, and I mean no one, is interested in or takes seriously lectures on border security from Senate Republicans. No one. In one of the most stunning acts of political cowardice in recent American history, a bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee was put forward in the U.S. Senate. It would have tightened asylum standards to stop exploitation of the asylum system. It would have surged enforcement resources to the border. It would have meant more expedited removals of those who enter this country unlawfully. It would have empowered the federal government to take the fight to the drug cartels who are laying waste to communities across our country with fentanyl. A bipartisan border security bill co-authored by a conservative Republican member of this committee. And it wasn't just voted down by Senate Republicans, it was denied even a debate on the floor of the United States Senate. Because the former president of the United States, and he said this publicly, thought it wasn't in his political interest for the nation to be served. It wasn't in his political interest for a bipartisan border security bill to be enacted by Congress. The American people are smart. So all of the performative chest pounding today on border security is utterly disingenuous. When Senate Republicans abrogated their basic governing responsibility and refused even to let us debate and amend that bipartisan border security proposal, the American people see that and understand that.
Yeah, and I do want to just shift back to the Biden should drop out part of the first Moskowitz clip. Then we'll get back to the border and just incredible delivery of those thoughts from Jon Ossoff. But I will say, as I was thinking while we were watching that clip about the earlier one, it's so important to remember this election is going to be close. That's just almost inevitable. Either way it goes, it's going to be a close election. And it's not going to be close in the popular vote, likely. But in the Electoral College, in these swing states, it's going to be close. And so if that's the case, presumably impacting the election becomes easier. If you work harder, you can impact it more easily than if we were trying to impact the entire popular vote in a major way. And so because of that, we're seeing all these hyperbolic conversations, I would describe them as, and sort of, I think Joe Scarpa recently described them as wetting the bed sort of conversations among Democrats about what should we do if Biden continues not to surge in the polls and has issues in polling approval rating, all that. Should we yank him out and put someone else in there? The logistics of how we would do that, I don't know. I guess Nate Silver saying Biden should proactively drop off the ticket. But what I don't think people understand is any fear we have because of Biden's political issues, which, as I've talked about, I think if people were just more informed on many of the successes of his presidency, he wouldn't have some of these issues. But because he does clearly have political popularity issues, would it be the correct move? Or I should say, the instability that comes of that, we would experience even more instability not having a nominee all of a sudden and trying to find someone else who hasn't been getting prepared this entire time to be the party's nominee, that would also be super frightening and unstable. And we would be experiencing just as much, if not more, fear. So that doesn't seem like the solution to me. Instead, the time we would take trying to find someone else, then introducing all of America to them, then convincing all of America that they're a good, solid option. Just spend that time and effort informing people on an already really successful presidency, right? Just that same energy and effort can go towards that. And I think that effort would be better spent in a way that could actually impact the election enough to sway what's going to be a close election in Biden's favor. And so let's just get out there, every single person who's having these sort of conversations about what crazy pull the ripcord type of solution can we think up. Instead, just put all of that energy and time into informing people on the stakes of this election and on Biden's record and on Trump's record and intentions. And I think that could do the trick. But it's going to be close, and that's frightening. Now, back to the border. John Ossoff said it perfectly. Here are actually some Republicans saying the same thing. It's Donald Trump who killed the deal.
I think the border is a very important issue for Donald Trump. And the fact that he would communicate to Republican senators and congresspeople that he doesn't want us to solve the border problem because he wants to blame Biden for it is really appalling.
I'm extremely disappointed in the very strange maneuvering by many on the right to torpedo a potential border reform bill. If we have a bill that, on net, significantly decreases illegal immigration, and we sabotage that, that is inconsistent with what we told our voters we would do. But it would be a pretty unacceptable dereliction of your duty.
I had a popular commentator 4 weeks ago that I talked to that told me flat out, if you try to move a bill that solves the border crisis during this presidential year, I will do whatever I can to destroy you.
But I would acknowledge President Trump failed, along with Republicans, Paul Ryan and the guys. They failed in 2018 to actually move a border security bill to tighten this so that we weren't dealing with this crisis right now. They failed to actually get the wall built. President Trump signed 12 continuing resolutions after he said he would never sign another one if they didn't give him the money to finish building the wall. Look, this stuff matters. It adds up. I call balls and strikes. This is not hard.
The Speaker says that if one migrant comes across the border, that's one migrant too many, and your bill doesn't do enough to completely shut down the border.
Actually, it does completely shut down the border in many ways.
So I'll just say to Republicans, Republican voters, right now, if your issue is the border, unless you just like the fear-mongering and dehumanization, then maybe you do stick to the Republican Party. But if you actually want level-headed, non-dehumanizing solutions, pragmatic solutions to issues we're experiencing, your party ain't the Republican Party. And that's going to be the case until Republicans come to the table in a serious way. And so then the message to Republican leaders is really they should have no justification to run on this topic until they do come to the table. And unfortunately, a lot of people won't get that. Let me know what you thought of all of that in the comments.